Yeah, I would love to know. Actually, what's coming up for me straight away, and I hope you don't mind me asking this,
Mm-hmm.
is do you feel that your personality has changed, or do you feel that your kind of approach to who you are has changed? And the reason I ask this is partly from my own kind of experience with who I am, but also I watched one of your older videos, and
Yeah.
in the Misfit Maven group, and in that you describe yourself as an extreme introvert.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, whereas I thought that you kind of described yourself as an extrovert these days.
I'm really happy to answer that. So, so yeah, my first question in response was going to be since when? Because when you said like, so has your personality changed? I'm like, since ever, since when? Like, we go through different iterations, but the thing that you're asking about here, I can specifically answer and answer it really well. So I had my personality type verified Jungian analytical and archetypal perspective, and where I look at it as an operating system rather than a personality type. Because
Yes.
our personality, in my learned opinion, comes from nature and nurture. And so what we're really talking about here is does your operating system change? Does your nature change? And because I believe that our nurture changes absolutely, right? So
Yes.
I'll kind of go back a layer from that. As a child, I was absolutely a dreamer and a player, and like my mum has these memories, and she reminded me of them recently. Of every time we went anywhere, she would find me chatting to someone, and some child or some adult, but she would come over and go, "Do you know that person?" And I'd be like, "No, I just met them." And she would like that would blow her brain because I would have very intimate, very deep conversation, even as a child, with people I'd just met, right?
Yeah.
And then and throughout my kind of adolescence, I suppose, and into my 20s, I learned that a lot of what was my intrinsic nature wasn't normal, wasn't okay, and I really, I learned, like a lot of innately feminine beings, to
Yeah.
be harder and to armor up and in to understand what made people successful and to be driven by that too.
Yeah.
And that took me into a path of television and working in an industry that is immensely fast paced and intense and is designed in many ways for extroverts.
Yes. Yeah.
In that world, I felt hugely introverted.
Okay.
The only way I knew how to survive it was cocaine. And so I had a huge cocaine habit in my 20s that most of my family and friends know about now, but not many people knew about then, because I was also, in the same way as in my teens, I was bulimic for years and no one knew about it because I'd made a big show of saying how much I hate throwing up. Like I've always been someone who had a public self and a private self. I've always
Yeah.
been someone who has like, this is who I show the world and this is who I keep for me. And that is another reason why I believed myself to be introverted, because I had a side for the world and a side for me. And after I kind of opted out of drugs and alcohol and TV and really went and found another way of being, a slower, more quiet, more reverent way of being, that also involved separating myself quite a lot and kind of going into a cave and keeping my eyes on my own mat and learning who I was. And I discovered that I liked a lot of time alone. And again, that told me that I was an introvert.
Yeah.
When I started learning about personality typing, and when I went and had a verification session with Chase, he told me almost instantly. He knew within 60 seconds without me doing very much, because there's so much about my being that tells him what type I am, that I was an ENFJ. And ENFJs are the most introverted of the extroverts. And
Okay.
in terms of personality typing, we have a cognitive stack, and how we process the world isn't as simple as introvert and
Yeah.
extrovert. It has
Yeah.
these four other functions as well, which are really, really important. And so I often don't know how I feel until I extrovert it.
Okay.
But there's a lot of other things that I don't extrovert, and this is a really, really interesting thing. So when he told me that I was an ENFJ, I had a complete identity breakdown and crisis. I spent 2 days in bed being like, "You're wrong," and
How
then
did that make you feel? Did that kind of just, like, other than blowing your world up, did it? Yeah. How did that make you feel?
well, it initially I was very much like just angry and frustrated of like, you're wrong, and how does somebody else, and again, like being in a position, which is a very ENFJ thing, of how dare somebody else know me better than me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was there for 2 days, and this is so my process generally in life, and then I was like, okay, I'm ready to listen now. What did you actually say? And then listened to actually everything he'd said, and realized that what he was really saying is, this isn't a box to put you in, but this
Yeah.
is a system, like this is your most natural self. And so if you lean into it, allow it to support you, let you be who you are and not have to be all the other things, it's actually really freeing. And so the more I have allowed myself to be an ENFJ, the
Mm.
more I have, in combination with some other things I should add. So in combination with human design and understanding that profile, in combination with my numerology, there's a lot of other stuff that kind of I put in.
Yeah.
It has helped me to understand myself better, to
Yeah.
understand how I operate better, and most importantly for me, let go of the things I'm not, so that I can have more space.
Yeah. So what that says to me is very much about, and I can relate as well from my own journey, is that feeling of being, like you said, boxed up.
Mm.
And we love polarities in our world. I don't know why, I don't know really where it comes from, but we love that idea that you're either this or that, and you can't be somewhere in the middle. And we talk a lot about, kind of the autism spectrum, and yet there's still this feeling that you're either autistic or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with personality types.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt very, very strongly about this in terms of, when I did my cognitive psychology research, looking into personality types and so on, and feeling quite strongly that I didn't, first of all, I didn't want to be an introvert, because I felt that that was somehow like being a social pariah, you know. And but second of all, even then, and this was 20 odd years ago, feeling that there was more to me than that. There was more to me than this, the idea that I was this very insular person, because I knew that I also love being sociable, and having deep conversations, and yes, meeting new people even sometimes. And it's so much more nuanced than I think we give it credit for.
And a lot of that's to do with education. So actually, INFPs are a lot more sociable than ENFJs. Now, we're in each other's shadows, which is so. I like the idea of people.
Mm.
I like to create a party environment on my terms. And when everyone shows up, I'm like, where is the INFP? Where is my best friend? Because this is too much for me now, you do it, right? Whereas INFPs are kind of the other way around. They're like, the thought of organizing it, and like setting it up, and the expectation, and people actually having to, like, all of that's way too much and like hurts. But once they're there, you're like, oh, hi, I love you. How wonderful to see you. Particularly if an ENFJ has screened everyone, so they're only people you like. So when
Yeah.
we understand this about each other and we work together, that for me is where the power is, right? Like, we weren't designed to be all the same, and we weren't designed to compete against one another. We were
Yes.
designed as collaborative parts.
I love that. We should hold a party.
Yes. And for me, like, that's what my community is, right? Like, I've worked really hard on creating a space where types come together that are compatible with one another and that make each other feel good and feel valued and feel recognized and feel seen. Because, like you said, when you first get a descriptor, so many people want to be more than that. And I'm like, and so for me, I try not to refer to it actually as the letters, but much more as the archetype, because I think the archetypes are much more helpful in terms of, like, this is the character you are, or the, if life is a play, this is the player, the role that you have in life.
I can't actually remember what my archetypes are, but yes, it's that feeling of actually, oh, this is, it's almost like a role model or something.
So the INFP often comes up as the dreamer and or the philosopher, right? And like, that's, for me, that's so much more engaging, right, than a bunch of letters.
Totally.
And the ENFJ is the cleric, amongst others, and it is like, it's just, it's much, I find the archetypes can be more friendly and more inviting.
And where do you feel as well that are, so obviously it's that kind of, like you said, that operating system, but then you've got kind of external things that come into play, and including things like that narcissist empath kind of relationship or dependency relationship. And for me, I can very much say that that kind of, it polarized my introversion, so that on the one hand it would make me feel very insular and very kind of what's the word, like a misfit, very much. And yet on the other hand, I craved love, support, sociability, all of that. And so whenever I got the opportunity, I'd kind of dive right in. And I wonder how that, for you, how that kind of makes sense.
Because I'm going to answer it from over here. And that's part of my job. I recently described in one of my pep talks the world that we currently live in as a one-size-fits-all world. And I hope very much that we're moving into a custom-fit world.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is, so literally, when I go into a shop and pick up an item of clothing that I'm interested in, and the salesperson says with bright, shiny face, "It's one size fits all," I go, "Oh," and put it back on the hanger. Okay. And for so many of us, that's what relating feels like, right? Like, there is one way to relate. You must be in a heteronormative, monogamous, long-term relationship, with the woman being in the feminine pole and the man being in the masculine pole, and like this, that's it. That is what life is. And if you can't fit in that, you're wrong. And that makes about as much sense to me as an outfit that is one size fits all, right? It's like, what? I am too short for this. My boobs are too big for this. Like, I will. How do you make an outfit, like a jumpsuit that fits every woman? You're crazy. Now, you're also crazy if you believe that relating is similar. Like, is this generic thing that we fit? It just isn't so. It's a custom fit. And I would be much happier in a world where there were many examples of how to find belonging, connection, togetherness, freedom, relatability, intimacy, all of those things, because the standard way of doing it for many of us leaves us in a place where we end up feeling either like we are a doormat, or we are in codependent, or that we are the narcissist ourselves, that we are selfish. And so I quite passionately feel that those terms are really, really unhelpful and are a side effect of a society that hasn't given us enough ways to relate to one another.
I think that's so interesting. Partly because I totally hear where that's coming from, and I agree. I love the idea of celebrating those different types of relationships. And also, in my 30s, I came to understand that my relationship with my mother was of like, she was the narcissist, I was the whatever, um, you know, the the victim, I suppose, at the time. And I had so many years of processing that relationship. Why doesn't she love me? Why didn't she support me? Why didn't she do this? Blah, blah, blah. And I can see so clearly now that obviously part of her issues have been generational trauma as well. And, but that's taken me a long time, a long, long time, and so much work to process and integrate. And I would still say that I see her as a narcissist, because in all of our interactions, it's still there, it's still prevalent. So how would you kind of, I don't know, how would you compute that for me, I suppose?
So, firstly, for me, we are not our behavior. We identify with our behavior. You called her a narcissist rather than she is a woman who exhibits to you narcissistic behavior, right? Now, I don't know whether she does that in every single relationship, and I don't know whether she's identified with it. What I do know is that when enough people tell us we are something, we become it, because it's easier than fighting against it. We fall into the role, right? And what I also know is that one cannot exist without the other. And so you can't have two narcissists in a relationship. It doesn't work. They repel, right? Like it's two whatever sides of the magnet, they repel one, right? And so do I think that it is possible? Like, do I think that you were the victim in the situation? Yes, as a child, absolutely, and obviously I do. And it's part of our generational karma to work on it. And she will have done some of it, right? Now, whether or not you can see it, whether or not it feels like it's enough, all of those things. That's all really, really personal. And I truly believe that each of us is doing the best we can with what we've got. And what I also believe, and again, I wrote about that this week, our parents their parents didn't even know there was a choice. Our parents, they did things like they separated, they divorced, they tried to step away from the things that weren't working for them, and that was hard for them. And now we, as the generation after that, are not marrying in the first place because we have choice, right? And so it's like, let's not forget the circumstances of the situations that people find themselves in. What they were doing was making choices. I know so many people of the generation above us who married to escape their parents. They don't necessarily know that on a conscious level, but it was like they moved from one safe but not safe environment into another safe but not safe environment. And I genuinely believe it's not fair to label somebody as a narcissist or as a codependent as if that's finite and that's what they are, it's their identity now, rather than seeing it in the context of their whole life and as your generational line and the pattern of that, and who's doing which bit of work. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And funnily enough, I do feel like I'm moving into that kind of phase now, and that I can certainly empathize so much with her journey, even though we don't talk about it. She doesn't talk about it. It's very much closed for her. But
and I should add that I have first-hand experience of this. It's not just me theorizing for you, right? Like I have experience of this in my very personal life and circumstances. And I attract so many people into my world who have that same dynamic, and that we are really, really working on it together. And I believe that there are 3 stages of it. So the first piece is empowerment, and it is understanding, like you said, the context of it, and like where you fit in, and what, and also seeing the world from your perspective, right? Like needing to hear the story and see the story from how do I fit into it and what about me? And then as we do that work and we create some more space, then we step into that second place, which is really embodying that which we have learned, allowing it to pass through our body somatically, healing it, feeling it, passing it
Yeah.
through. And also starting to see, how do I relate? How do I relate to the other people in this story? How do I relate to other people who've also been through this? Like, how do I relate, right? Like, from first of all, it's just me to, oh, look, there are other people out there who have experienced this as
Yeah.
well. And then the third stage of the journey is expression. And at that point, it comes to a place of like, how do I share this? How do I shortcut this for other people? How do I normalize it? How do I make it okay so that other people may learn and come into this space? And I've really seen over the last 12 years really that I've been doing this work on this particular pattern in
Yeah.
relationships with people, that people move through those 3 phases, and that it does, whatever place you're in with it now, it will shift and it will change and it will soften.
Thank you. That's a really, really empowering answer, I think, for, I do know so many people in this situation. That's why I wanted to bring it up. It's not just me.
Yeah.
So I would love to know, we talked a little bit about your personality journey, and but what about your kind of the heart of who you really are? Like, where would little Ebonie be amazed at where you are right now?
I think that little Ebonie would like just not be surprised at all. Like, hashtag of course.
I love that.
Because that part of me, like little Ebonie, genuinely was a lion child, right? Like such a like queen and absolutely lioness. Like would just be like, well, of course you have all of those things. Why would you not have all of those things? Why would you not have created that stuff? And there would also be a part of her that would be like, you're so grown up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look how many things you do. Right? Like, genuinely, because there's a little part of me that is still such a dreamer whose favourite place to be is, alone, drawing, listening to a story, and I put myself in that position on purpose many times. Those people who know me, like my favorite place to be, like drawing with an audiobook on. Like I genuinely am still that little girl.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot for me to get there. I have to either consciously create space so that I can be there, or if it's not conscious, and for years it wasn't, there's a part of my personality type that needs to make sure that everything is taken care of and everything, that I know what's going on everywhere before it feels safe enough for me to pop myself in this bubble.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. And would she be? Do you feel that she is still there within you, and that you're very much connected to her?
Absolutely, yeah. And that it wasn't always the case. I have done vast amounts of inner child work, transactional analysis work, therapy, embodiment. Like all of the stuff that I have done has been to reconnect me with the shadow parts, the disconnected parts, the disowned parts, the quiet parts, the too loud parts, and the overly feminine parts, like all of that. And so it is with great pride actually that I say yes, all of those small parts of me come with me now, but I had to go and get them. I
Yeah.
left a lot of them along my way. I kind of abandoned parts of me that were like annoying or too slow or not able to keep up, or all of that, or too wounded or too sore or too vulnerable or too fragile or whatever, or too shouty or too angry, or like there's so
Yeah.
many parts of me that along the way I went, no, I haven't got time for you, no, I haven't got time for you. And particularly over the last 6 years, I have reclaimed them all and find myself in a position today where there are no parts of me I'm not willing to meet, and that is a
Wow.
nice place to be.
That was one of my next questions, was kind of where do you feel you are now on that journey? Are you, we're always working on something. What are you working on right now, for example?
On a I would love to be able to answer that question surfacely. I would love to be able to say, I'm working on this. I can't, you know me. I'm working on intimacy, actually, like really working on letting myself be seen in my fullness, in my range, and not. I described it in one of my mastermind groups recently as, for the longest time, and I had only just realised it as I said it, but for the longest time, until the PR committee have worked out what I am feeling and how to spin it, I don't share how I'm feeling.
Okay.
And so it's like, when I'm feeling, and I'm not sure what I'm feeling yet, I lock myself away until I have felt it, understood it, and made a narrative for it. And then I can come and share with the world and go, yes, I feel like this, but it fits in with this, and there's that whole thing. And I'm really working on just being so much messier and so much less controlled with how I am perceived.
Okay. And how does that feel now? Obviously, you're kind of open to it.
Yes. It's so uncomfortable. Like, I want to swear so badly. I'm like, it's
all right. We've been swearing.
so fucking uncomfortable. It's the most uncomfortable thing in the world, right? Like, to discover that there are more layers of control freakery within me that actually control, like, what I am willing to feel in the presence of others. Like, that's ridiculous, but it's also true, right? Like, I hadn't realized how deep the armour runs, how controlled and poised and remarkable I am at navigating the narrative, right? And like spinning it in a certain way so that I can feel privately, so that I can go, and again, that's a personality type thing, because as my personality type, the cognitive stack means that I don't know what I feel until other people know what I feel.
Yeah.
That feels very disarming for me, particularly as someone, because of my cognitive stack, I know how everybody else in the room is feeling. Right? So everyone, because I'm so good and so quick at understanding how everyone else feels, there is an assumption that I know how I feel. I don't.
Yeah.
And so owning that, and again, that's why I find the typing system so powerful, and like being able to express that to a room is wonderful.
Yeah. Do you wish everybody knew this?
Yes. Like, I really do. And I wish that they, like, I see a lot of people teaching it for marketing purposes, right? Like, understand your avatar and then, like, essentially manipulate them into buying. And I don't agree with that. I mean, I don't not agree with it, but the thing I want everyone to know is in terms of relatedness, right? And so I was talking to Jonathan a couple of days ago. So I run my business with Jonathan, and there was something came up, and he's studying cognitive stack at the moment for a thing that we're doing. And one of the things that came up is that I don't have a recall function. My ability to recall is based on how I felt in the situation, not on the facts, right? So it's always coloured by my feeling of the room or the circumstance of the situation.
Is that not the same for everyone, though?
No. So some people can remember the facts, right? Other people cannot remember the facts. They only remember the feelings. Other people remember how everyone else feels. So there's all sorts of different ways that we remember. And so we were talking, and I was saying, next time I'm in a relationship with someone who says, you did that, and I say, no, I didn't, can you remind them that I'm not lying? I just don't remember doing it. And he was like, yes, I can, because it's absolutely true. It's not that I'm lying. And and I've had this with my parents, right, over years. They were like, you did that, or you didn't do that. And I'm like, yes, I did. And so for me, having thought about it, having written it down, having journaled it, really is almost the same as having done it. And in recall, I'm like, did I do that? I don't know anymore. And so that's why, like, on those little elements, if we could understand each other better and understand how each other remembers and what our deepest fears are, because our deepest fears, what we're worried about, the part of our brain that tricks us, all of that is individual, and clouds what we actually see in a room, what we're looking for in a room, you know?
Yeah. And I feel right now, especially, that I really wish that we could all learn to understand each other better, and that things aren't just black and white. I really feel like this last year in particular, you know, especially through social media, the polarization is just off the scale, and that it's creating in us that inability to connect and to relate to different types of people on different levels.
Yeah, there's two parts of that I actually want to talk back on. One is, I am aware through some of the conversations that I've been listening to that people of colour find the Myers-Briggs particularly, but personality typing, really problematic for many.
Okay, yeah.
And in part, my understanding of it, and obviously I'm willing to be wrong, but in part my understanding of that is a bit like, for women, seatbelts were designed for men, not women. You know, so much of our world and the data that we have and the systems that are created and we use every day were created essentially for white men, right?
Yes.
And, you know, then for women, and then for, you know, as it filters down. And so there have not been studies into everybody. So the 16 personality types may very well, like, I can sit here and go, oh, there are 16 operating systems. Wouldn't it be cool if we understood them?
Yeah.
There might be 20. There might be, like, I don't know. And so I use it really with a pinch of salt and say, it is working for me and my people. And I'm open to it not being helpful for everybody. And wouldn't it be cool if, and what I'm really hoping for is this custom fit world where we really do the data on more people so that we can have something that actually fits everybody. That would be really
and cross-culturally as well, because obviously it's a very westernized viewpoint.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so that. And then there was something I wanted to talk about, and you wrote a Facebook post the other day, and I was writing one at the same time, and then I saw yours and I didn't publish mine. And
I'm sorry.
no, don't be. I didn't publish mine, but it's been sitting there, and I was like, oh, I'm going to wait and see if I can talk to Zoe about it. So the post that I was going to write was, in my immediate family, half of the people have had or are waiting for the vaccine. And half of the people are very clear that they don't want to, that it isn't right for them, and that they will be choosing not to. And in my immediate family, because of the work that we have all done and the way that we were raised, and this idea of being maven that I'm so passionate about, of holding more than one truth in the palm of one hand and allowing yourself to see that, there is no animosity, there is no division, there is no you must pick a side, there is no binary hate or right and wrong or any of that. And yet, like you, when I step onto social media or I step out into the very controlled narrative that I see out in the world, it is divisive, and they want us to pick a side, right?
Was there a question in that, or?
No, I wanted to raise it because I'd seen your post, and I was like, yes, this, like, can we please continue to have conversations where we make it okay for people to disagree with one another without it being, well, you can't be my friend then, right?
And honestly, I think I've really struggled to express or even understand actually how I feel about this over the last 12 months or so, because I have a very deep connection to my values, and also because of, you know, my kind of healing journey, you know, those values have become even more important to me. And so with that filter, it has been hard for me to understand why somebody might choose something different. Because for me, you know, from my viewpoint, from my research, etc., etc., it feels so wrong. And yet, that is the beauty of social media as well, is that you can see other people's stories. You know, you can hear what they've gone through. You can look at their circumstances. And so part of my typing is that I think I am a mediator as well. So I literally can hold all truths at once, and I can see all points of view, and I can empathize with them all. So that comes into play, and I just want everybody to get along.
Yeah.
I just want everybody to understand that there is not one fact here. There is not one truth.
And, you know, for so many types of people, the one true path is a thing for them, right? And they operate with one true path throughout everything, and they are fixed, and that does work for them, and they cannot understand how you could have different choices in different circumstances. Now, I am a classic example of that. So it's something I talk about a lot because it's funny and trivial, but I don't have my coffee the same any one day, right? Like, you cannot, it's not how Ebonie has her coffee like that. I just don't, right? Like,
Yeah.
sometimes I have it with cow milk. Sometimes I have it with hemp milk, with nut milk, with no milk, with butter, with maple syrup, with sugar, with none, right? Like, genuinely, any given day, I will have it a different way.
Your house sounds like a lot of fun.
Thanks. But like, for some people that's really frustrating. Like, you know, for them it's like, surely you just have your coffee, like, you know how you like it and you have it that way. And I'm like, I like it all the ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes I need more sweetness and other times I don't. Like, it depends where I am in my cycle, depends what's going on. Like, also, if you give it to me and you've made it, that's the most important thing. I actually don't care about any of the other things.
Oh,
Cup of coffee, how wonderful is that?
Yeah.
So, in that same vein, I agree with you. You know, it would be really, truly wonderful if we could stop labeling each other. And I come back to that same thing around like codependents and narcissists. It's the same as like anti-vaxx and vaxxers. Like, for me, those descriptions, those identifiers, those titles, those like devil, God, you know, polarizing things are just really unhelpful. And yet we've been so conditioned into it, particularly as liberals, and I identify myself in there, it can be we can be dangerously unaware of how hypocritical we're being.
Yeah.
Because I know someone called me out on this the other day, and it was really interesting to see. I said something along the lines of, if you think that, this was around the Meghan Markle interview, if you think that Meghan is just making it up, blah, 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 please, like, check your bias and leave, because I really believe that you are making that based on her skin color, on her sex, on her history, on her, like, all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And somebody said to me, you know, by saying, if you're not this, then leave, you're just as judgy.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, you know what? You're right. And I'm willing to rephrase it and be like, if you're not open to seeing another point of view, then please get out of my living room, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of, that was what fueled that post for me as well, is that originally I think what wanted to come through, you know, immediately was something quite judgmental and divisive like that, and I kind of sat with it for a bit, and, you know, I chose the words quite carefully because I wanted it to be inclusive rather than exclusive.
Yeah.
And that also for me, I need to learn as well that, you know, my judgment is very much there. It's not that I'm just kind of looking out at the world and saying, you're all being very judgmental.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's a very, I've been in the personal development world pretty much my whole life. Like, I came from this world. My parents are both in it as well. And so at a very young age, I learnt the expression, what I see in you, I honour in me. And it's so true, right? Like, what I see in you, I honour in me, because ultimately what we see in another is a reflection of something in ourselves. And that works both ways. Now, if you
Yes.
ever ask someone to give somebody else a compliment, that might sound weird, but in my world, we would do that a lot, right? Ask someone to share a compliment or say something wonderful that you see in another human.
Mm.
They will always say the things that they value,
Yeah.
that are them as well, right? So I often tell people, you're so creative, you're so fun, you're so full of light. And obviously, or maybe not obviously to everybody, like, what I see in you, I honor in me, right?
Yeah.
Simultaneously, because that's how the world works, when we're like, oh, you're so judgy, you're so closed-minded, you're so like whatever, we're also saying what we see.
Yeah.
Because it's there in us too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I recognize that in myself as well. So that's why I have to kind of just, take a moment sometimes. And most of what I've shared on socials this year I've really kind of cut back in terms of what I share, because I find myself going down that route of, this is what I believe. You all need to look at this. Which, in some respects, maybe that's true, but also it's that polarizing thing again. And I don't find it very helpful. When I see other people post in that way, it just riles you up, whether you're for it or against it.
Yeah, and there's a level of it coming from a place of being a lighthouse and wanting to show people who you are and what you stand for.
Mm.
Like in the last week or so, seeing men choose to either say something or not say something,
Yeah.
give me a taste of what it must be like for somebody else when they see someone say something or not say something. And so I think that from one lens, it can be for the sake of it and for controversy or
Yeah.
to provoke in some way.
Yeah.
And in other ways, it can be really affirming, like, so for me, an example, I have on the very limited bio space, for someone who likes to write essays, on the very limited bio space that I have on my Instagram, I always write she, her.
Yeah.
And that might be really obvious to lots of people. They're like, well, you're a heterosexual woman who is, clearly whatever they want to think. But by using my pronouns, I tell people that I am a safe place, that I am an ally, that I care about these things, that I am open to these things. And that's really important for people who don't have it as obvious or as normative or as whatever. And so sometimes it is virtue signaling, and sometimes it's signaling, right? And sometimes it's sharing your opinion, and sometimes it's creating a reaction. And I think
Yeah.
what's different is the intention behind
Yes.
it, because no one else can tell. It's a bit like when you go to yoga, no one on the outside can tell whether you're putting any effort in. No one
Yeah.
else can tell. It's your body. Only you can tell whether you're holding your banders or putting any effort in or breathing. No one else can tell. And so your intention has to be personal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really fabulous way of thinking about it, and of reframing for everyone on social media, I think. Absolutely. What motivates you to keep coming back to this work, do you think?
I literally don't know who else to be or how else to be.
Yeah.
I've never had a proper job in my life. I've never done anything else.
Yeah.
I've tried. I last about 24 hours in a job. I mostly try and tell them how to do it better, and then they don't like it and fire me. I yeah, I don't. It sounds really cliche at this point, and so I feel reticent to say it, but it is my mission. It's my purpose. It's what I'm here for. And if I don't do it, I don't do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that as well. I had a professional role for about 18 months. That's it. In my whole life.
And I worked in the film industry. I really tried to, to be normal. I really
Yeah.
wanted to. A lot of my story is like I really wanted to be normal. You don't get, my Ebonie is my real name. I went to a Steiner school. I lived in a commune, a house truck, all sorts of different things. I'd lived in 7 countries before I was 7. I have this kind of very eclectic, I guess, background and start in life. And my rebellion was like, I wanted normal. I cannot tell you how much I wanted TV dinners, numbers, like to watch Neighbours, to own Reeboks. Like I wanted normal so badly. And I went through all of that. I got it and was like, oh, okay, right. And so now I am me again, I suppose. But I can't do anything else.
It's really lovely to hear you say that, because basically that's how we're raising our kids. And we've always said of our boy in particular, who is on the autism spectrum, and he's very kind of straight-laced and likes things a very particular way. And we've, right from when he was a baby, actually, we've always joked that he was going to be like the banker in the family or something. Which might still happen.
And it might still happen. There are members of my family who have lots of normal things, and for whom that really works. And then there's elements of, I think all of us always have arnica, rescue remedy, lavender and tea tree oil in our bags, regardless of where we work or how we show up in the world or how normal we are. And so there will always be a part of it that sticks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, that's lovely. I want to be mindful of your time, and I would. There's so much I want to ask you, honestly, but where do you feel we are now in terms of humanity and what's shifting, and perhaps also what is humanity's kind of core truth right now, or multiple truths? What needs to happen or shift, do you feel?
So a long time ago, we lived in a society that was a matriarchy, right? Like that was a matriarchy, and there was too much abundance, and abundance is not always a good thing, right? Like it's very much touted as a good thing, but it means an overflow, right? And it was too intoxicating. It was too much for whatever reason. There was no structure, there was no order, there was, it was just an overflow of everything, which is essentially chaos. And we then have also lived in a patriarchy, which is very much like, okay, well, so the other side of things, where things are structured for the sake of like structured, and 10 different types of paperwork just to say you're allowed to do something, right? Like it's also crazy, and so both, neither working separately, I think is the point I'm trying to make, neither working separately going to be the future. And where we are now, as we move more and more into the Aquarian age, which will take we're right really at the beginning of that settling, of that landing. We won't have fully adjusted into that time for another 80 to 90 years, where that's so in 80 to 90 years we will be fully in Aquarius, right? And into that way of living. And where I see us going with that is unity, is really about coming together, being greater than the sum of our individual parts, is working in community, in connection, really moving into a place of we over me. And we've been in me, we kind of had the height of me, if you like, in I mean, in some ways I feel like the 80s was the very height of
Yeah.
me, right?
Yeah.
Which is wonderful as you come to the end of an era, to like come out of that, like me, that's the whole point of the Piscean age, to get into this place where we now need to shift into we and what it means to work together, and that gender will become more and more and more less binary,
Yeah.
and so will operating systems. So will, we will move into a place where uniqueness is revered, and equity becomes more and more important, as everybody is as valuable as one another whilst they are being true to themselves and each have a part. And whether that means that we will return to a concept of villages or communities, or working in smaller confines, I don't know. But what I have seen kind of anthropologically is that, lots and lots of individual groups, what looking out for themselves kind of doesn't work, and
Yeah.
trying to all work together also doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
It's too clunky. You see it in corporations and stuff like that. And so I think that we'll start to find better sized chunks for us to work in, that allow us to really be human in the best possible ways, and to be free and belong, to work, to have this kind of interconnectedness. And for me, that's where all these shadows of narcissism, of codependency, of interdependence, of ultra dependence, all of that stuff is really coming through,
Yeah.
so that we can come to a place of being both individual and sovereign and part of a collective, and that it is
Yeah.
that separate truth and combined truth that the next stage of human development is really about.
Wow. Well, I'm excited for that. I don't know about everybody else, but yeah, that sounds wonderful to me.
It does sound wonderful, but it also sounds like a long way to go.
It
And
does.
it's a little bit like saying, I'm going to come in and declutter your house and leave you only with the things that are beautiful and that you love, right? It's like, if
Yeah.
someone said that to you, you'd be like, oh my God, yes, please. That sounds heavenly, to have a house full of only things I love. And then I say, okay, but in order for us to get there, I need to empty everything you've ever owned onto the floor. And you're going to kind of have to live with it and step over it for a bit, and like find things you'd forgotten about and don't like, and find the cupboard where no one's kind of cleaned up a bowl of cereal that's been 15 years. And that is the bit, unfortunately, that we have to go through together first, is emptying all the cupboards and seeing what we find.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so much the process we're going through right now. Absolutely. Yeah. So, Ebony, when you're going through your toughest times, because you seem to me like a person who always has it together, but I know that we're all people, we're all humans, so that's not the case.
It's not the case.
What like, how do you get back to that core part of yourself?
So really summed up in the two things I said, right? So one is to remember that I am separate from everybody else, that I don't rely on everyone else, that I don't have to wait for everybody else, that I don't need to know what everyone else is doing. So much of my world is like, is collaborative, right? Like,
Yeah.
is, what's it called, affiliative. Like, I'm such an affiliative being that sometimes I need to remember that it's okay for me to choose me first, and so that can really involve being separate from, right? I need some time alone where I draw, or really honestly, like story binge, whether that is Netflix or audiobooks.
Yeah.
Storybooks are my favorite. Like, I just find me like a seaside romance with someone who leaves the city and meets whatever. Like, I love that shit. And so that is a part of it, of like art, separateness, and uplifting stories of like finding each other, right? Like, that
Mm.
stuff really takes me back into my core. And then I need to be heard. And whether that is by one friend or a group of friends, once I figured out what it is that hurt or that I was experiencing, when I know what emotion it actually was that I was with, because I often don't know what emotion I'm with until I'm there, then I need someone to listen so that I can go, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then I am done and I am back.
Fabulous. Well, it has been a joy to chat to you today and to find out so much more about you. Where can people find you online?
My favourite place to be is Instagram, has to be said. Although I try not to be there every day, so don't worry about me if I'm not there every day, I'm fine. But Instagram is my favourite, at Ebonie Allard, and also at misfit.for-life. So I show up in both places. And then on the interwebs, I'm at ebonieallard.com, and Ebonie is with an IE, not a Y, or misfitforlife.com.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. I think we've covered a bit of everything.
Kind of how I operate. Thank you. And I love to do stuff like this, and it always surprises me when people are like, I didn't know that about you. I'm like, I feel like I'm a very open book. So I love to have these conversations, and thank you for your questions, which are just really fun and really...
Awesome. We'll have to have a second installment at some point.
Love that. Yeah.